Really exciting fight at lightweight. We have our third debuting fighter out of the UFC's PI over in Shanghai. The UFC Academy prospect Rongzhu taking on Kazula Vargas. Matt, it is an interesting fight because for Vargas, you look at it. I mean, he didn't have the sexiest record coming into the UFC. You look at the 5 on in, it's 2-3. And so far in the UFC, he took on Lecco Alex da Silva. And then his last time out, he took on Brock Weaver. Alex da Silva was one of those guys that got really hyped up by Michael Bisping, of all people, in his debut, and it didn't go all that great, but overall, still a young prospect, lots of, experience on the regional scene. He was ultimately able to win out over Vargas, and to me, the problem with Vargas coming into the UFC, and especially the problem in that fight, he's a really low output power guy. If you want to go see a fun fight of his, it was against, well, a familiar name that's now in the UFC at 170 pounds, Jordan Williams, back at Tachi Palace Fights 19 in 2014. And it was just an absolute knock him out, drag him out type of fight. He ends up finishing him in the first round. There's a cut, doctor stoppage. But if you look at it for Vargas, he's kind of already been in the spot. Like in his debut, he took on the young prospect, he lost the young prospect, and he got beat handily in every single round. For Rongzhu, this guy is the most impressive to me out of the 3 debuting fighters out of the PI in Shanghai that I've seen. I mean, wow. I love the fights. I get it. I mean, he has so many fights. He's only 21. He just turned 21. He took his first pro fight at 16. He's 17-3. And if you watch the way that this guy fights, it's very, very fun. And he really brings the fight to a lot of his opponents. I can't wait for this one.
It should be a really, really interesting matchup. Now, the problem for Kazula Vargas is going to be that he's got that weird kind of plodding forward style. Now, if he does fight those upper echelon strikers at lightweight, I think we all know how that fight's probably going to end. He's going to get pieced up, and then anyone with good footwork can probably get out of the way. Now, with Rongzhu, he's not in that upper echelon in the lightweight division, and it will be interesting to see really where his ceiling is, because at only 21 years of age, every time we see this guy for really the next while, like every single fight for the next 2, maybe even 3 years, he is going to get better. Time after time after time. And for Kazula Vargas, I hate to say it feels like he is being brought in right now as kind of one of those showcase opponents, but let's just call it what it is. You have a guy who is 0-2 in his UFC run right now, fighting the very hyped up prospect coming out of China. So I don't know if I'm as down on this fight as maybe you might be, but I don't know what Vargas is going to have for Rongzhu that can really make this fight tough for him, because in my mind, I do see Vargas as that plodding forward kind of style, and the problem he's going to have a lot is, and just really to bring it back to what this weekend's main event was, Gastelum is a great boxer. He's really good on the inside, really good on the outside, but his issue is that when he moves forward, he really only does it in a singular direction, where if you do fight somebody who has great left and right movement, they're going to be able to counter you on the inside, kind of like I mentioned, and then use their footwork to get out of the way. I kind of see some parallels being drawn between this weekend's main event. I know those guys are almost title level, and these guys are very new level to the UFC, but I do see this going very similar. If Vargas can land a big shot and get this fight to the mat, I do see him having success, but my issue is for Rongzhu, he's got that great accuracy on the inside, and the other thing I like too is the variety of attacks that he can throw at Vargas. For Vargas, he really only is going to get it done with the hands. He can incorporate some kicks into his game plan, but we know him more as this sort of overhand-centric fighter, where for Rongzhu, if he can keep this fight, the more technical he can keep this fight, the better. If he can keep everything short and in the middle and really just be counter-heavy, I can see him running away with a decision in this fight.
I look at Rongzhu and you look at all the wins. I mean, 17-3 overall. 11 of those 17 wins are by knockout. 10-fight win streak that he's bringing into this one. You look at the second to last fight. You look at some of the names, and this was the same thing that we did in, well, our last preview with Aoriqileng, and you go, okay, well, 0-1, 18-5, 10-9, 0-4, 17-5, 9-7. But back it up to the second to last fight. He beat Sha Yilan, and you might think, okay, 17-5. This guy's debuting in the UFC next month. Like, this is a UFC caliber win, and he knocked him out in the first round. And if you go back and watch that fight, he eats a right hand for dinner when it starts, and then he just starts to give it back. Very, very technical fighter. Holds his hands nice and high. Really nice, almost tie stance with his hands up like that. He'll whip out a lot of kicks as well. Again, this guy is the one that I'm most highest of out of all 3 fighters that we have coming out of the UFC's PI in Shanghai. So I've tipped my hand, but I mean, I look at it. He goes jab, jab, and then a big right hand to follow it up. Like, he throws a lot of great boxing combinations too. Listen, this is a guy with a ton of upside. Obviously, you can see it from the age. You can see it from the amount of fights that he's had. But he's an absolute machine.
Now, I once said Jonathan Martinez is going to basically become the GOAT, and I looked dumb because
you don't have to apologize every week for it.
Don't worry. I am going to play devil's advocate to tell you how Kazula Vargas might be able to win this fight.
Wrestle.
Exactly. If he can get this fight chest to chest and make it as ugly as possible, because the more range that there is in this fight, the more success that Rongzhu is going to have as this fight progresses too. And the thing about Vargas, he can sometimes duck and then throw with power over the top. Now, if he does do that, he can become a little bit predictable with his style. And if you do have a really good counter striker, like what we're dealing with in this fight, I do think anyone who is predictable like that can get picked apart, especially as the fight progresses. So for Vargas, he does have to make this fight really ugly. And I understand that's much easier said than done. But again, get it to the cage. Make it ugly. Try for the trip takedowns. Do everything you can to just not make this fight be an open space. And I do think Vargas can have some success in this fight. But my issue is he might only have success for minutes that way. I really don't see him going out there and being able to keep that kind of pressure or sustained pressure for those 8, 9, 10, 11 minutes that are going to have to be enough to win him 2 of these 3 rounds. So I do like Rongzhu in this fight against Kazula Vargas.
We talked about Vargas in his debut against Alex De Silva. He gets taken down. He just gets outclassed in that fight. He looked decent against Brock Weaver until the illegal knee. But again, when he's working in tight, when he's trying to work in the takedowns, when it's Kazula Vargas' fight, he's usually the bigger fighter in most of his contests. Again, we talked about the weight, former welterweight. He is going to give up height and a little bit of reach in this one. If we're talking about the odds, Rongzhu open to -250. He's still about there now. And if you look at Kazula Vargas, about a +210. If we have a look at the Topology votes, Matt, 872 of them, 87%. Rongzhu, 73% by knockout for the Kazula Vargas fans, 40% by decision, 43% by knockout. I really do think that Rongzhu looks like a finished product from all of the tape that I've watched on him for a 21-year-old prospect. The guy's first fight, he was 16 years and 2 weeks old, and he won by DQ. But after that, it kept opening up and he kept fighting. I really do like Rongzhu in this fight.
I like Rongzhu in this fight as well. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to jump on the hype train just yet. Now, I will be a casual observer. I'll wave as it goes by. But I do think that Vargas is going to make this a very ugly fight. And here's the great thing about Rongzhu. It's going to make us learn something about him and really make us learn something about where his UFC career is going to take him after this fight. So I agree with you. I've got Rongzhu as well.
Matt, both of us going with China's Rongzhu to get the win. Really looking forward to this card. We have 3 title fights up at the top. We're talking strawweight, flyweight, well, really flyweight, strawweight, and then welterweight. Big time card. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.